Hey, greetings everyone. You're in the shop with Briz. And in today's episode, we're going to hit part 2 of building this willow tree nativity scene backdrop. You'll want to catch up on part 1 as we covered building the small upper stage base and the large lower base. And also part 1 also started with the building of the backdrop as far as putting, we got up to where we were putting the roof on. Part 2 is going to continue on with that, and also we're going to cover building the little manger. And I built a little jig in there that helped me make this, and I hope you find it helpful if you decide to do something like this. That will probably make things flow a little bit smoother for you. So let's get to the video and see part 2 of this willow tree nativity scene. After this is glued up and do some minor sanding, I've got to install some dowels in this stage here where these corners at, so that they'll protrude about 3/4 of an inch up, and there will be a hole centered here and a hole centered there, and it'll slide onto the dowel rod and hold it in place. A couple of years ago I made this manger, and it's just a freehand type construction with small stock. So I'm taking 1/2 inch stock here that's oak. It's actually scrap wood, and thin cutting them down to little board planks. And there are several ways that you could do this. If you have a bandsaw with a good blade, you could make them that way. My bandsaw is not suitable, so I'm actually making them on my miter saw, and I would encourage you to do that procedure at your own risk. Using my miter saw, this is the back fence of it, but for your 45-degree cut, you end up with a wider gap than what you want. So I just stuck another 1x2 in here and cut all the way through it so I can establish a cut. And what this board here will do will act as a support to hold this narrow piece. I've marked from the edge of this slot over 1/8 of an inch because I'm making 1/8 inch blanks. And you can keep moving this over to the line until you get to a reasonable distance, or however close you want to get to your blade before you feel uncomfortable. But this is how I make these 1/8 inch planks. Looking at how we're going to build this manger, I took these planks here, and since they were I've had them down thin enough, they work pretty well in my bandsaw. So I made some little square inch boards, and then I made a jig here, which is actually, this is a 90-degree cross, but one side has short to simulate the legs, and the upper part is the manger where Jesus will be laying in. So taking 2 of these at right angles, I cut a dado in each one so that they go in half, and I glued it. And this glue here hasn't set up, but I ensure that once it's I apply the glue, I make sure it'll fit into my jig, because this is how I'm going to cut it on the table saw. I've set this little piece of plywood here up against my fence, and then use this to where it just misses the blade. Now we'll take this in and set it in here and run it across there, and let's see what happens. Turn it around. Building the manger is actually an artistic thing that you'll just need to do. I've slowly taken some oak and cut it down into little slats. I've got a variety of different sizes, shapes, and for these boards here, I've just been using these. And in a second, I'll just show you how I've been cutting those down to size. And then sanding them. If you don't get them to the exact size you need after running through the bandsaw, and actually, you know, it's going to be a rough cut depending on the type of blade you have, I'll run it through the sander. I just wanted to also show you that I don't have plans for the manger itself, so if you'll notice these cross ties that I made with this jig, I'm going to continue to use this manger. It really does work, but I'm thinking about beefing it up. And so with these cross ties, I use the same jig, but they're bigger. And all I did to change the size of my cross ties was I went ahead and put this jig back into my miter sled, and in order to keep the same ratio on everything, I just made one cut on the outer cut to make it wider so that this larger cross piece would fit into it. And then I turned the jig around and cut on the outer side of that. And I just kept whittling away till I had these pieces fit in it, and I thought that's wide enough. Then when you start putting these pieces on, I mean, it's like you got to have 5 different holding points. So if you have, I need to get some smaller clamps, but if you have a bunch of those, it'll really be helpful. Another thing that's helpful is I'm glad I made this jig a little long, because now I'm able to set my legs in here vertical, and that holds the thing up so that I can begin construction on the side rails, and that makes it a lot easier. So that's just a little a construction tip I'd like to pass along to you. This jig really ensures that every manger you make, the angle is going to stay the same on it. The way it sits on the table, you know, is the proper angle, so everything is flush to the ground. To cut these little boards to the proper width, I just took a 1/2-inch piece of pine here, put it over the dimension from the inside of the blade over to the fence, and cut it. And there's my little miniature 2x6.